The grand office tower of Meridian Enterprises pierced the skyline of Seattle like a gleaming spear of ambition, its glass facade reflecting the amber glow of sunset. Rain cascaded down the windows in rhythmic patterns, transforming the city below into a watercolor painting of blurred lights and shadowed silhouettes. Inside the pristine 42nd floor executive suite, Gabriel Morrison stood motionless before the floor-to-ceiling windows, his tailored Italian suit contrasting sharply with the storm outside. His reflection stared back at him, polished, composed, untouchable, the very image of corporate success that Fortune magazine had celebrated in last month's cover story. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying this story, please consider subscribing to our channel. The board approved the Singapore expansion unanimously, his assistant announced from the doorway, her voice barely registering in Gabriel's consciousness. The acquisition will be finalized by Monday morning. Gabriel nodded slightly, his gaze fixed on the raindrops racing down the glass. Another victory, another billion added to Meridian's market cap, another reason for the business world to whisper his name with reverence and envy. At 43, he had built an empire that spanned continents, employed thousands, and transformed the landscape of global technology. Yet as the rain beat against the window, all he felt was the hollow echo of achievement without purpose. "Will you be attending the charity gala tonight, sir?" his assistant asked, already knowing the answer. "Have the car ready at 8, Gabriel replied, straightening his platinum cufflinks. These events were performative, calculated opportunities for networking disguised as philanthropy, but necessary maintenance for a man of his position. As his assistant's footsteps faded down the corridor, Gabriel's phone vibrated with a notification. A message from Elise, his wife of 6 months. "Don't forget your speech tonight. The foundation is counting on your announcement." Attached was a perfectly curated photo of her in an elegant evening gown, prepared hours in advance for the cameras. That would inevitably document their arrival. Their marriage had been celebrated in every major publication. The union of Gabriel Morrison, tech visionary and CEO of Meridian Enterprises, with Elise Harrington, the refined and mysterious European art consultant who had appeared in Seattle's elite circles just a year ago. Their courtship had been brief, intense, and the subject of endless speculation. To the world, they were the perfect power couple, her quiet sophistication complementing his ruthless brilliance. But Gabriel knew better. Behind the practiced smiles and calculated public appearances lay a relationship built on convenience and mutual benefit rather than love. Elise gained status and security. He gained a partner who understood the rules of his world and played her role flawlessly. It was a business arrangement in all but name, each detail negotiated with the precision of a corporate merger. The rain intensified, drumming against the glass with newfound urgency. Gabriel straightened his tie and turned away from the window, preparing to descend into the carefully choreographed performance of his life. The elevator doors opened silently, revealing the pristine interior that would carry him down 42 floors of power and privilege. What Gabriel didn't see was the figure at the end of the corridor, a man in gray maintenance coveralls pushing a cleaning cart, his weathered hands gripping the handle with quiet determination. Ray Hernandez had worked as the night janitor at Meridian Tower for nearly 8 years, moving through the gleaming corridors like a shadow, invisible to the executives who occupied the upper floors. At 57, his body bore the marks of a lifetime of hard work, calloused hands, a slight stoop to his shoulders, lines etched deeply around eyes that had seen far more than most would guess. As the elevator doors closed on Gabriel Morrison, Ray glanced up briefly, then continued his work with methodical precision. Unlike everyone else in the building, Ray saw beyond the perfect facade. He knew secrets that could shatter the carefully constructed image of Seattle's most powerful couple. Because every night for the past 3 months, While cleaning the executive offices after hours, Ray had discovered something that no one else knew, evidence that Elise Morrison was hiding a baby. It began with small things. A pacifier tucked hastily into a designer handbag left behind one evening. Formula stains on financial documents in the private office Elise sometimes used. A lullaby hummed absent-mindedly when she thought no one was listening. Then came the hushed phone calls in languages Ray recognized from his military days stationed overseas. Russian, occasionally Polish, urgent whispers about pediatricians and childcare that didn't match the public narrative of the Morrisons. Childless power marriage. Ray never spoke of what he observed. Years of life had taught him that everyone had secrets, and it wasn't his place to unravel them. But he wondered about the child, whose it was, where it was kept, and why a woman with every privilege imaginable would need to hide her own baby. The charity gala at the Westlake Grand Hotel shimmered with wealth and influence. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light over Seattle's elite as they mingled in designer formal wear, champagne flutes catching the light like liquid gold. Gabriel and Elise Morrison arrived precisely at 8:30, late enough to make an entrance, early enough to be respectful. Photographers captured their arrival, the flash of cameras illuminating their practiced smiles. "You look distracted," Elise murmured as they glided through the crowd. Her arm linked through his, her accent slightly more pronounced in private conversation. "The board approved Singapore. You should be celebrating." "I'm fine," Gabriel replied, automatically nodding to the mayor across the room. "Just thinking about my speech." Elise studied him briefly, her blue eyes calculating beneath perfectly arched brows. At 34, she possessed a sophisticated beauty that photographs couldn't quite capture, something in the way she held herself, an old-world elegance combined with razor-sharp awareness. "Make sure you mention the Children's Hospital wing, that's why we're here." Before Gabriel could respond, his phone vibrated. He glanced down to see a message from his executive assistant. "Urgent call from Mumbai office. Investment agreement complication. Requires immediate attention." "I need to take this," he said, already stepping away. "Cover for me with the foundation." "Director." Elise's smile never faltered, though something flashed briefly in her eyes, irritation perhaps, or something deeper. "Don't be long. Your speech is in 30 minutes. Gabriel found a quiet anteroom, closed the door, and spent 20 minutes resolving the crisis in Mumbai, authority radiating through his voice despite the distance. When he emerged, he spotted Elise across the ballroom, engaged in animated conversation with the hospital board chairman. Even from a distance, her poise was remarkable, head tilted at precisely the right angle to convey interest. Laugh timed perfectly to put her companion at ease. As Gabriel moved to rejoin her, his path was blocked by a waiter carrying a tray of champagne. The man stumbled slightly, apologized profusely, and steadied himself. Gabriel barely glanced at him, just another faceless service worker in a room full of power and influence. He didn't notice the waiter's weathered hands or the recognition that flashed in the older man's eyes. Ray Hernandez hadn't expected to see Gabriel Morrison tonight. He'd taken the catering job to supplement his income. His granddaughter's college tuition wasn't going to pay itself, and the janitorial position at Meridian barely covered his basic expenses. Now standing just feet from the man whose office is he cleaned each night, Ray felt strangely exposed, as though his knowledge of Elise's secret was somehow visible. "Ladies and gentlemen," the foundation director's voice rang out over the crowd. "If you would please take your seats. We're honored to have Mr. Gabriel Morrison share some exciting news about Meridian Enterprises' commitment to children's healthcare in our community." Applause rippled through the room as Gabriel made his way to the podium, every step radiating confident authority. "Thank you for the warm welcome," he began, his voice measured and commanding. "Meridian Enterprises believes that our success means nothing if we don't use it to build a better future for the next generation. As Gabriel continued his speech, announcing a $20 million donation for a new pediatric research wing, Ray observed Elise from his position against the wall. While everyone else watched Gabriel, Ray watched her, the way her hand occasionally drifted to her purse when her phone silently lit up, the slight tension in her shoulders, the practiced smile that never quite reached her eyes. She checked her watch 3 times during the 15-minute speech. When the event concluded, Ray watched the Morrisons depart in their sleek black Tesla, Elise already on her phone before they'd even left the building. He clocked out of his catering shift, changed back into his worn jeans and flannel shirt, and caught the late bus toward his small apartment in the Rainier Valley district, a world away from the luxury high-rises and gated communities of his employers. The bus windows fogged with condensation as rain continued to beat against the glass. Ray wiped a small circle clear and watched the city transform around him, from gleaming towers and exclusive boutiques to modest apartment buildings and corner stores with security bars on the windows. His thoughts kept returning to Elise Morrison and the hidden baby. Having raised 3 children of his own, Ray recognized the distinctive anxiety of a parent separated from their child. He'd seen it in Elise's eyes tonight, beneath the perfect makeup and practiced smiles. As the bus lurched to his stop, Ray made a decision. Tomorrow night, after his shift at Meridian Tower, he would follow Elise, not to expose her secret, but because something about the situation troubled him deeply, an instinct honed by decades of watching people and reading the truths they tried to hide. Whatever Elise Morrison was hiding, Ray suspected it was more complicated than a simple secret child. And if there was indeed a baby involved, Ray's conscience wouldn't allow him to simply look away. The following evening, rain still blanketed Seattle in a persistent drizzle as Ray made his way through the executive floor of Meridian Tower. The emptiness of the building after hours always struck him, how spaces designed to project power became hollow stages once their actors departed. His cleaning cart squeaked slightly as he navigated the corridor toward Gabriel Morrison's office suite, the sound echoing against marble floors, polished to mirror-like perfection. Ray had developed a routine over years of working nights. He started with the conference rooms, then moved to the administrative offices, leaving the executive suite for last. This approach wasn't about efficiency, it was about privacy. In the quiet hours after midnight, he could work undisturbed, allowing his mind to wander while his hands performed tasks rendered automatic through repetition. Tonight, however, he moved with heightened awareness. When he reached Elise's private office, a smaller space adjacent to Gabriel's corner suite, he noticed the door was ajar. Light spilled into the darkened hallway, and the sound of hushed conversation drifted outward. Ray slowed his cart, careful to silence the squeaky wheel. "I don't care what it costs," Elise was saying, her accent thicker with emotion. "Find someone else. This arrangement isn't working." Ray couldn't hear the response from whoever was on the other end of the call, but Elise's frustration was evident in her reply. "She needs more attention than Elena can provide. I can't keep making excuses to visit." A pause. "No, Gabriel still doesn't know. And he cannot find out, not until I've secured everything legally." Another pause, longer this time. 3 more months. That's all I need." Ray stepped back, positioning himself in his cart in the shadows of a recessed doorway. Across the hall. Minutes later, Elise emerged, locking the office behind her. Even in distress, she moved with measured grace, though Ray noted the tightness around her eyes, the slight tremor in her hand as she checked her watch. Following her wasn't part of his job description, but the military had taught Ray to trust his instincts. Something about Elise's situation gnawed at him, not just professional curiosity, but genuine concern. He'd seen too many people trapped in impossible circumstances to simply look away. After finishing the executive floor, Ray changed from his uniform into street clothes in the basement locker room. He emerged from the service entrance just in Time to see Elise's silver Audi pulling away from the curb. Ordinarily, Ray would catch the number 7 bus to his apartment in Rainier Valley. But tonight he hailed a rideshare, giving the driver simple instructions. Follow that silver Audi, discreetly. The driver, a young woman with bright purple hair, raised an eyebrow but shrugged. Your money, your mystery, she said, pulling into traffic. They followed Elise's car north through downtown, then east across Lake Washington, via the 520 bridge. Rain streaked across the windshield as they entered the affluent suburb of Medina, where waterfront mansions housed tech billionaires and old Seattle money. The Audi turned down increasingly exclusive streets before stopping outside a modern house with clean architectural lines and walls of glass that glowed softly from within. Wait here, Ray told the driver, adding a generous tip through the app. I won't be long. He approached cautiously, staying within the shadows of the perfectly landscaped property. The house wasn't ostentatious by Medina standards, but its simplicity spoke of expensive minimalism rather than modesty. Through floor-to-ceiling windows, Ray could see Elise enter what appeared to be a living room. She was greeted by an older woman with silver hair pulled into a severe bun, Eastern European in appearance, her posture rigid and formal. Words were exchanged, Elise's body language conveying urgency. The older woman nodded and disappeared down a hallway, returning moments later with a bundle in her arms. Even from this distance, Ray could tell it was an infant, perhaps 6 months old. Elise took the child, her entire demeanor transforming as she held the baby against her chest. Gone was the polished socialite, replaced by something raw and genuine. A mother reunited with her child. Ray watched as Elise sat on a modern sectional sofa, cradling the infant while speaking rapidly to the older woman. Whatever she was saying appeared to be met with resistance. The silver-haired woman shook her head repeatedly, gesturing in a way that suggested impossibility or refusal. The conversation continued for nearly an hour, growing increasingly tense. Finally, Elise kissed the baby's forehead with lingering tenderness before reluctantly handing the child back to the older woman. Ray ducked deeper into the shadows as Elise emerged from the house, her composure visibly fractured. Once inside her car, she sat motionless for several minutes before starting the engine, her head bowed as if in prayer or despair. Ray returned to his waiting rideshare, his mind working to piece together what he'd witnessed. Back to the city. Please, he told the driver, who had been scrolling through her phone, completely uninterested in his surveillance activities. As they crossed back over Lake Washington, the Seattle skyline glittering through the rain ahead of them, Ray considered what he knew. Elise Morrison, wife of one of Seattle's most powerful men, was secretly visiting a child, presumably her own. The baby was being cared for by someone else, an arrangement that clearly caused Elise distress. And for some reason, her husband remained unaware of the child's existence. The situation troubled Ray deeply. In his 67 years, he'd learned that secrets of this magnitude rarely stayed buried, and when they emerged, the damage could be catastrophic. But it wasn't his place to intervene in the lives of people so far removed from his world. He was just a janitor, invisible to the Morrisons except as a function, not a person. That night, sleep eluded Ray. He lay awake in his modest one-bedroom apartment, listening to the hum of the refrigerator and the occasional passing car on the street below. Photos of his late wife Maria and their 3 grown children watched over him from the bedside table, their faces a reminder of everything he'd worked for, everything he'd lost and preserved. Maria would have known what to do. She had possessed an unerring moral compass, a certainty about right and wrong that Ray had always envied. Everyone deserves dignity, she used to say. Even the rich, even the foolish, even those who make terrible mistakes. The next morning, Ray arrived at Meridian Tower earlier than usual. The day cleaning crew was still finishing up, and the business hours bustle hadn't yet begun. He made his way to the executive floor under the pretense of checking supplies, nodding politely to the occasional early arriving employee who barely registered his presence. Gabriel. Morrison's corner office was unlocked. The CEO often arrived before dawn, though he was absent now. Ray entered cautiously, conscious of crossing boundaries both professional and social. The space was immaculate, designed to impress with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of Puget Sound. A large desk of polished walnut dominated one end, its surface arranged with military precision, laptop centered, folders aligned, a single framed photograph. Ray approached the desk, drawn to the photograph. It showed Gabriel and Elise on what appeared to be their wedding day, posed against a backdrop of the Mediterranean Sea. They were smiling, yet Ray noted the space between them, the way their bodies didn't quite turn toward each other. It was a beautiful picture of a marriage that, to Ray's eye, lacked intimacy. The sound of voices in the corridor prompted Ray to retreat quickly. He slipped out through a side door just as Gabriel's executive assistant arrived, arms laden with folders for the morning's meetings. Back in the safety of the supply closet, Ray contemplated his next move. Direct intervention seemed impossible. Who would believe a janitor over the CEO's wife? Yet doing nothing felt equally wrong. As Ray stocked his cleaning cart for the evening shift, a notification lit up his phone, a reminder of his granddaughter Sophia's dance recital that weekend. The ordinary joy of family life stood in stark contrast to the secret drama unfolding in the executive suite. Ray thought of Sophia, of his own children growing up, of the sacrifices and compromises parenthood demanded. Whatever Elise's reasons for hiding her child, Ray couldn't believe they were trivial. That evening, the executive floor was busier than usual. Meridian was finalizing the Singapore expansion, and meetings ran late into the night. Ray worked around the activity, invisible. As always, when he reached Elise's office, he found her door closed but lights still on. Through the frosted glass, he could make out her silhouette, pacing as she spoke on the phone. Ray positioned himself within earshot, ostensibly cleaning the nearby water fountain. "I don't care about the money," Elise was saying, her voice carrying through the door. "I need those papers finalized before he discovers anything." A pause. "Yes, I understand the risks." "Do it anyway." As her call ended, Ray quickly moved away, pushing his cart toward the conference rooms. His mind raced with possibilities, none of them reassuring. Was Elise planning to leave Gabriel? Was the child not his? The fragments he'd gathered painted a troubling picture, but still an incomplete one. Later that night, as Ray was finishing the executive bathroom, the door swung open unexpectedly. Gabriel Morrison stood in the doorway, jacket removed, tie loosened, the lateness of the hour evident in the shadow of stubble on his jaw. "Sorry," Gabriel said automatically, stepping back. "I didn't realize anyone was still here." It was perhaps the first time the CEO had spoken directly to Ray in all his years at Meridian. Up close, Gabriel looked different than his public image. The confidence remained, but there was exhaustion in his eyes, a heaviness to his shoulders that his tailored shirt couldn't disguise. "No problem, sir," Ray replied, moving his cleaning supplies aside. "I'm almost finished." Gabriel nodded absently, his mind clearly elsewhere. He moved to the sink, splashing cold water on his face. In the mirror, his eyes briefly met Ray's, and for a moment, recognition flickered, not of Ray specifically, but of another human being occupying the same space. "Long night," Gabriel commented, reaching for a paper towel. "Yes, sir," Ray agreed. "Expansion keeping everyone busy." Gabriel looked slightly surprised at Ray's knowledge of company business. "The Singapore deal, yes." He studied Ray more carefully now. "You've been with Meridian a long time, haven't you?" 8 years next month, Ray confirmed, sensing an unusual opportunity in this moment of connection. "That's longer than most of my executive team." Gabriel said with a hint of irony. You must see everything that happens in this building. Ray chose his words carefully. I see things, not everything. Something in his tone must have registered with Gabriel, whose gaze sharpened. What's your name? Ray Hernandez, sir. Gabriel extended his hand, a gesture so unexpected that Ray hesitated before accepting it. Thank you for your work, Ray. It doesn't go unnoticed. As Gabriel turned to leave, Ray made a split-second decision. Mr. Morrison, he said, sometimes what matters most is right in front of us, even when we can't see it. Gabriel paused in the doorway, looking back with a puzzled expression. Meaning? Ray shook his head slightly. Just something my wife used to say. Have a good night, sir. 3 days after his unexpected encounter with Gabriel Morrison, Ray found himself working the day shift, a rare occurrence necessitated by a coworker's illness. The rhythm of Meridian Tower felt entirely different during business hours. Corridors hummed with purposeful activity, conference rooms filled and emptied like tidal pools, and the invisible barriers between service staff and executives seemed more pronounced in the harsh light of day. Ray moved methodically through the lower floors, aware of how people stepped around him without truly seeing him. Occasionally someone would offer a distracted "excuse me" when his cart blocked their path, but their eyes rarely met his. This invisibility, once merely an occupational reality, now felt like an advantage as Ray's mind continually returned to Elise Gabriel and the hidden child. Shortly before noon, Ray was restocking paper towels in a 35th floor bathroom when the door swung open and Elise Morrison entered, checking behind her as if concerned about being followed. She froze upon seeing Ray, clearly startled by his presence. I'm sorry, ma'am, Ray said immediately, gathering his supplies. I'll come back later. No, Elise said, her voice sharper than intended. She softened her tone. No, please finish your work. Ray nodded and continued replacing the paper towel roll, his movements deliberate and unhurried. In the mirror, he could see Elise watching him, something calculating in her expression. She moved to the sink, running water over her wrists. An old-world remedy for stress that Ray recognized from his own mother's habits. You're not the usual day cleaner, she observed, her accent more pronounced than when she spoke publicly. Covering for someone, Ray explained simply, closing the dispenser. Elise turned, leaning against the counter as she studied him. You work nights usually? Yes, ma'am. Executive floor, mostly. Something shifted in her expression, a flicker of wariness. How long have you worked here? Almost 8 years. Elise absorbed this information, her eyes never leaving his face. What's your name? Ray Hernandez. She nodded slowly. You've been in my office, late at night. It wasn't a question, but Ray answered anyway. Yes, ma'am. I clean the executive offices after hours. A heavy silence fell between them, the invisible wall between their worlds momentarily transparent, but no less real. Ray maintained a neutral expression, his hand steady as he wiped down the counter. What do you want? Elise finally asked, her voice low. Ray looked up, genuinely surprised. Ma'am? You've seen something, or heard something. Her fingers tightened around her designer handbag. How much? The implication struck Ray like a physical blow. He straightened to his full height, dignity radiating from his weathered frame. I don't want your money, Mrs. Morrison. Elise's expression remained guarded, but confusion now mingled with the suspicion. Then what? Ray considered his words carefully. I have a granddaughter about the same age. Children need their parents. Color drained from Elise's face. She took a step back, colliding slightly with the counter behind her. You don't understand anything, she whispered. No, ma'am, I probably don't, Ray acknowledged. But I understand that secrets can destroy people, even the people we're trying to protect. Elise stared at him, her carefully constructed facade cracking to reveal something raw and desperate beneath. For a moment, Ray thought she might confide in him, this stranger who had glimpsed her truth. Instead, she gathered herself visibly, rebuilding her composure like armor being locked into place. "I need to go," she said, moving toward the door. She paused with her hand on the handle. "Please," she added, not turning around. "This isn't what you think." Before Ray could respond, she was gone, the door swinging shut behind her with a soft, definitive click. That evening, Ray's usual bus route home took him past a small neighborhood park in Capitol Hill. On impulse, he pulled the stop request cord and disembarked, drawn to the quiet green space as the day's light began to fade. He settled on a bench, watching young parents with their children, the ordinary miracle of family life unfolding around him. A young father was teaching his daughter to ride a bicycle, running alongside with one hand steadying the seat. The little girl's face shone with determination and fear in equal measure. When she finally managed several pedal strokes on her own, her triumphant laughter carried across the park. The father caught her as she wobbled, lifting her high in celebration. Ray thought of his own children, now grown with families of their own. He remembered teaching them to ride bikes in a park not unlike this one, the weight of responsibility both terrifying and wonderful. He thought of Elise and the baby he had seen her holding, the transformation that had overcome her in that moment, the genuine emotion that had broken through her polished exterior. Whatever complications surrounded Elise Morrison's situation, Ray was certain of one thing: she loved that child. And for reasons he couldn't fully understand, she felt compelled to keep the baby secret from her husband and the world. As twilight deepened around him, Ray made a decision. He would try once more to speak with Elise privately, not to threaten or expose her, but to offer the perspective of someone who had raised children, who understood that families were complex and messy and rarely matched the perfect images people projected. The next morning brought unexpected news. Ray was preparing for his shift when his supervisor called the janitorial staff together. "Meridian's having some kind of emergency board meeting today," she announced. "All non-essential personnel are being asked to stay off the executive floors until further notice. Security will be tight." Murmurs rippled through the gathered cleaners. Corporate drama rarely affected their routines so directly. "What happened?" someone asked. The supervisor shrugged. "Above our pay grade. Just stick to the lower floors today. And stay out of the way." Throughout the day, rumors filtered down through the building's hierarchies. Ray caught fragments of conversation in elevators and hallways. Stock dropped 15 points overnight. Accusations of financial impropriety. Emergency press conference scheduled. By late afternoon, the situation had clarified. Financial irregularities had been discovered in Meridian's Asian operations, suspicious transactions dating back months that suggested money laundering or embezzlement. Gabriel Morrison had called an emergency board meeting to address the crisis, and the company's stock was in freefall. Ray thought immediately of Elise's hushed phone conversations about money and legal papers. The timing seemed too coincidental to ignore. As he worked through the lower floors, Ray's concern deepened. Whatever Elise was involved in, the stakes had just risen dramatically. Despite the directive to avoid the executive floor, Ray found himself drawn there as his shift ended. He took the service elevator up, reasoning that he needed to collect cleaning supplies from the storage closet. The corridor was eerily quiet compared to the usual end-of-day bustle. Light spilled from under Gabriel's office door, the only sign of activity on the entire floor. Ray moved quietly toward the supply closet, passing Elise's office on the way. To his surprise, the door was ajar, and a shaft of light cut across the darkened hallway. Soft sounds came from within, not voices, but something more visceral. Ray hesitated, then gently pushed the door wider. Elise sat alone at her desk, face buried in her hands, shoulders shaking with silent sobs. Papers were scattered across the polished surface, along with an open laptop displaying what appeared to be financial records. She looked up at the sound of the door, her eyes red-rimmed, and mascara smudged beneath them. "You," she said, recognition dawning through her distress. "The janitor." Ray remained in the doorway, one hand still on the door handle. "I'm sorry to disturb you, Mrs. Morrison. I was just getting supplies." Elise laughed bitterly, gesturing toward the financial records on her screen. "Do you want to see what destruction looks like? Everything I've worked for, everything I've sacrificed, all of it might be for nothing now." Ray stepped inside, closing the door quietly behind him. "The financial irregularities they're talking about downstairs, you're involved?" "Not the way everyone will think," Elise said, wiping her eyes with the back of her hand, a surprisingly unguarded gesture for someone so controlled. "I needed to move money for the adoption, to expedite it, to make sure no one could challenge it later." "Adoption?" Ray repeated, pieces beginning to fall into place. Elise looked at him directly, something like resignation in her expression. "My sister's child, my niece. Katya died in childbirth 6 months ago in St. Petersburg. The baby, Sophia, had no one else. I've been trying to bring her here legally, to adopt her, to give her the life my sister would have wanted for her." "Why?" "The secrecy?" Ray asked gently. "Why not tell your husband?" Elise's laugh was hollow. "Our marriage arrangement didn't include children. Gabriel made that very clear from the beginning. His company is his legacy. He has no interest in heirs or family complications." She gestured to the financial records. "I used my own money from before the marriage. I thought I could finalize everything before anyone noticed the transfers. I never imagined it would trigger this kind of investigation." Ray absorbed this information slowly, his perception of the situation shifting. The woman caring for the baby in Medina? Elise's eyes widened. "You've been following me?" "I was concerned," Ray admitted. "I saw you with the child. I could tell she was yours, in your heart, if not by birth." Elise's defenses seemed to crumble entirely. "Elena was my sister's friend. She came to America with Sophia to help with the transition. The legal process has been a nightmare. International adoption always is. But with Russia's current relations with the U.S., it's nearly impossible. I had to find ways around certain restrictions. I had to protect Sophia's future." Before Ray could respond, voices approached in the hallway, Gabriel and several others, their tones urgent and tense. Elise straightened immediately, wiping away any trace of tears. "Please," she whispered to Ray. "Whatever you think of me, don't make this worse." Ray nodded once, then slipped out through the side door, becoming invisible once more as Gabriel Morrison entered his wife's office, his face grave with the weight of corporate crisis. The corporate crisis engulfed Meridian Enterprises like wildfire through dry brush. By morning, financial news networks displayed Gabriel Morrison's face alongside graphs of plummeting stock values and speculation about the future of his leadership. Security guards now stationed themselves at every entrance to the executive floor, checking credentials with unprecedented scrutiny. Ray arrived for his evening shift to find the building transformed. Teams of auditors occupied conference rooms, their presence extending well into the night. Legal counsel moved through corridors in tight clusters, voices lowered to urgent murmurs. The janitorial staff received modified instructions: clean quickly, speak to no one, avoid all areas where sensitive discussions might be occurring. "They're saying it could be insider trading," Ray's supervisor told the night crew during their briefing. "Or worse. The FBI has requested documents. Just do your jobs and keep your heads down." Throughout the evening, Ray maintained his routine. While keeping alert for any sign of Elise, the revelations of the previous day had shifted his perspective entirely. What he had interpreted as deception now appeared to be desperate protection. A woman trying to save her orphaned niece while navigating the constraints of her marriage and international law. Shortly after midnight, Ray was emptying trash bins in a secondary conference room when the door opened unexpectedly. Gabriel Morrison entered alone, his tie loosened and shirt sleeves rolled up, a rare break in his meticulous appearance. He stopped abruptly upon seeing Ray. "Mr. Hernandez," Gabriel said, recognition evident in his voice. "Working late again?" "Yes, sir," Ray replied, continuing his work without pause. "Seems everyone is tonight." Gabriel moved to the window, gazing out at the Seattle skyline glittering against the night. "They're saying someone inside Meridian has been moving money through shell companies in Eastern Europe. Millions of dollars, disguised as legitimate business expenses." He spoke without turning, as if thinking aloud rather than addressing Ray directly. 8 years building this company, and it could all collapse because of financial impropriety. I didn't even know was happening. Ray remained silent, aware of the delicate balance between appearing interested and seeming intrusive. Gabriel turned suddenly, his expression sharpened by exhaustion and stress. "You said something to me the other night," Gabriel remarked, "about what matters most being right in front of us, even when we can't see it. What did you mean by that?" Ray set down his cleaning supplies, giving the question the consideration it deserved. "Just that sometimes we focus so much on what we're building that we miss why we're building it in the first place. And what would you say is the why, Mr. Hernandez?" Gabriel asked, genuine curiosity breaking through his fatigue. "For most people, family, connection, something that remains when all the rest is gone." Ray gestured toward the window, toward the empire Gabriel had built. "All of this is impressive, sir. But at the end, it's just a company. Companies don't remember who built them." Gabriel studied Ray with new interest. "You sound like you've given this some thought." "I've had time," Ray acknowledged. 67 years gives you perspective. I spent 20 of those years in the military, thinking rank and accomplishment were what mattered. Then I came home to a wife who'd raised our children almost single-handedly. She taught me what really counts. And what happened to her?" Gabriel asked, sensing the past tense in Ray's words. "Cancer, 4 years ago," Ray said simply. "But our children and grandchildren remain. Her legacy continues in ways mine never could through work alone." Gabriel nodded slowly, absorbing this. "I'm sorry for your loss." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Have you seen my wife this evening?" "She's not answering her phone." Ray hesitated, weighing loyalty against truth. "No, sir. Not tonight." After Gabriel left, Ray continued his rounds with increased vigilance. The interaction had confirmed his growing suspicion that Gabriel remained unaware of Sophia's existence, and likely of his wife's involvement in the financial irregularities now threatening his company. 2 hours later, Ray was finishing the executive kitchen when he heard the distinctive sound of heels on marble. He stepped into the corridor to see Elise walking rapidly toward her office, her usual composure fractured by evident distress. Without thinking, Ray followed, reaching her door just as she was unlocking it. "Mrs. Morrison," he said quietly. Elise startled, then relaxed slightly upon recognizing him. "Ray, you shouldn't be here. There are security guards everywhere. Your husband is looking for you," Ray told her. "He's worried." "He should be," Elise replied, pushing open her office door and gesturing Ray inside. Once the door closed behind them, she continued in a lowered voice. "The adoption agency just called. Someone has filed a complaint questioning my suitability as Sophia's guardian. They're suspending the process pending investigation." "Because of the financial allegations?" Ray asked. Elise nodded, collapsing into her chair. "The money transfers to Russia look suspicious in light of everything else. I was using a separate attorney, one specializing in international adoptions, with flexible interpretations of the regulations. Now it all appears connected to Meridian's problems. She pressed her fingertips to her temples. I was trying to protect Sophia, to secure her future. Instead, I might lose her entirely. Ray stood quietly, witnessing her distress. You need to tell your husband the truth. You don't understand, Gabriel, Elise responded, a bitter edge to her voice. He married me because I represented order, control, an asset to his public image. A ready-made family with complications and legal problems, that wasn't part of our arrangement. With respect, Mrs. Morrison, you might be underestimating him. Ray suggested. He's searching for answers right now. The company he built is in jeopardy. If these financial issues are connected to your efforts to save your niece, he deserves to know. Elise's gaze was sharp with sudden suspicion. Why are you involved in this? Why do you care what happens to me or my family? Ray considered the question carefully. I've spent most of my life being invisible to people like you and your husband. Moving through rooms no one notices I'm cleaning, hearing conversations no one realizes I can understand. Most times, I mind my business and keep walking. He paused, gathering his thoughts. But sometimes you see something that matters, something human. I saw you with that baby in Medina. I saw what she means to you. The mention of Sophia softened Elise immediately. She reached for her phone, scrolling to a photo and turning it toward Ray. The image showed the infant smiling, her dark eyes and delicate features reminiscent of Elise herself. She has my sister's eyes, Elise said softly. Katia was brilliant, a concert pianist studying at the conservatory in St. Petersburg. We lost our parents young, had only each other. When she became pregnant unexpectedly, I promised to help. However I could, her voice caught. I never imagined that would mean raising her child without her. Ray studied the photo, seeing the innocence that hung in the balance of adult decisions and legal complexities. The woman caring for her, Elena, she can't continue? Her visa expires next month, Elise explained. The original plan was to have the adoption finalized before then, with Elena returning to Russia and Sophia legally becoming my daughter. Now everything is in limbo, and I can't bring Sophia to live with us without raising questions I'm not prepared to answer. The sound of voices in the corridor silenced them both. Footsteps approached, then receded. When Elise spoke again, her voice had hardened with resolve. I need to secure these files before the auditors request them, she said, turning to her computer. If they trace the money directly to the adoption attorneys in Moscow, I'll lose any chance of completing the process legally. Ray watched as she began transferring files to an external drive. This could make things worse, he cautioned. Destroying evidence won't help your case. I'm not destroying anything, Elise replied without looking up. I'm protecting my niece's future. These documents contain personal details about Sophia, about my sister's death, about the Russian officials who've been helping expedite the adoption. If this becomes public, those connections disappear. Ray remained silent, understanding her desperation while recognizing the danger of her actions. The line between protection and obstruction was blurring by the minute. What about Gabriel? He finally asked. He's still your husband. This affects him too. Elise's hands stilled on the keyboard. Gabriel made his priorities clear from the beginning. Meridian comes first, always. When we married, he told me he didn't want children, didn't want distractions from building his company. She looked up at Ray, vulnerability breaking through her determination. I agreed because I didn't think I wanted children either. Then Katya died, and Sophia had no one, and suddenly everything changed. I couldn't abandon her. I couldn't. Preparing and narrating this type of story took us long efforts and hard work. So if you are enjoying the story, please consider subscribing to our channel. Before Ray could respond, the office door opened abruptly. Gabriel Morrison stood in the doorway, his expression shifting from surprise to confusion as he registered. Ray's presence in his wife's office at nearly 3 in the morning. "What's going on here?" Gabriel demanded, his gaze moving from Elise to Ray and back again. His eyes narrowed as he noticed the external drive and the open files on Elise's computer screen. "Are those the financial records the auditors have been asking for?" Elise rose slowly, her composure returning like a mask sliding into place. "Gabriel, I can explain." "I certainly hope so," Gabriel replied, his voice dangerously quiet. "Because right now, it looks like my wife is removing company financial records in the middle of an audit, assisted by a member of the cleaning staff." He turned to Ray, authority hardening his tone. "Mr. Hernandez, I think you should leave." Ray hesitated, looking to Elise, who gave him a slight nod. "It's all right, Ray. Thank you for your concern." As Ray moved toward the door, Gabriel's words stopped him. "Actually, wait outside. I'll want to speak with you after I understand exactly what's happening here." The door closed firmly behind Ray, leaving husband and wife alone with the truth hovering between them like a live wire, dangerous and illuminating all at once. Ray stood in the dimly lit corridor outside Elise's office, the quiet hum of the building's ventilation system, the only sound breaking the tense silence. Through the frosted glass panel in the door, he could see the silhouettes of Gabriel and Elise, first standing apart, then moving in animated conversation, their shadows merging and separating like dancers in a complicated choreography of confrontation. He couldn't hear their words, only the occasional rise in volume that suggested the conversation had escalated beyond calm explanation. Once, Elise's voice carried clearly through the door, "You never asked," before dropping again to indistinct murmurs. 20 minutes passed, each second stretching with the weight of consequences. Ray remained where Gabriel had instructed, though every instinct urged him to leave, to remove himself from this collision of worlds that weren't his own. He thought of his daughter Carmen's advice whenever he got involved in workplace drama. "Dad, just do your job and go home." Sensible words he'd ignored completely in this situation. The office door opened suddenly, startling Ray from his thoughts. Gabriel emerged first, his expression unreadable, followed by Elise, whose usual perfect composure had abandoned her entirely. Her eyes were red-rimmed, and she clutched a tissue in one hand, the external hard drive in the other. "Mr. Hernandez," Gabriel said, his voice controlled but strained. "I'd like you to drive my wife home. Not to our penthouse, to the house in Medina." Ray blinked in surprise. "Sir, take my car," Gabriel continued, removing keys from his pocket and holding them out. "Security will let you through the executive garage. I'd prefer this handled discreetly." Ray accepted the keys hesitantly. "Mr. Morrison, I'm not sure." "It's fine, Ray," Elise interjected, her accent thicker with emotion. "Gabriel knows everything now." Gabriel's jaw tightened at these words, but he nodded in confirmation. "Everything," he repeated, the single word carrying the weight of revelations Ray could only imagine. "Mrs. Morrison needs to retrieve something important from Medina immediately, before any further complications arise. I would go myself, but I have auditors waiting for explanations I'm still formulating." The tension between them was palpable, not anger exactly, but something more complex, a fundamental recalibration of understanding. Gabriel turned to Elise, his expression softening slightly. "We'll continue this conversation tomorrow. Do what you need to do tonight." Elise nodded wordlessly, the simple gesture conveying both gratitude and apprehension. Minutes later, Ray found himself behind the wheel of Gabriel Morrison's Tesla, guiding the luxury vehicle out of Meridian Towers' underground parking structure, while Elise sat silently in the passenger seat. The digital dashboard glowed softly in the darkness, illuminating her profile as she stared out at the nearly empty downtown streets. "He didn't know about Sophia," Ray said after several blocks of silence, a statement rather than a question. "No." Elise confirmed quietly. He didn't know about any of it. My sister's death, the baby, the adoption process, the money transfers. I kept everything separate, used my personal accounts, hired attorneys who didn't know I was Gabriel Morrison's wife. She exhaled slowly. I thought I was protecting everyone. They crossed the 520 bridge toward the east side suburbs, Seattle's. Skyline receding behind them like a luminous mirage. Rain began to fall, droplets catching the headlights of oncoming cars. How did he take it? Ray asked. Elise turned from the window to look at him directly. He asked why I didn't tell him from the beginning. Why I didn't trust him enough to share something so important. Her voice wavered slightly. The truth is, I was afraid. Our marriage was built on mutual benefit, not love. At least not at first. He wanted a certain kind of partner, someone who understood his world, who wouldn't demand emotional attention he couldn't provide. I needed security, a fresh start in America after years of struggling to help my sister. She fell silent. For a moment, collecting her thoughts. When Katja died and left Sophia orphaned, everything changed for me. Suddenly I had a responsibility that transcended any arrangement with Gabriel. I needed to secure Sophia's future, to bring her here legally, to become her mother in every way that matters. I convinced myself Gabriel wouldn't understand, that it would disrupt the careful balance of our relationship. And now? Ray prompted gently as they exited the highway into Medina's exclusive neighborhoods. Now he knows that his wife has been secretly trying to adopt her orphaned niece while inadvertently creating a financial scandal that threatens his company. Elise replied with a bitter laugh. He's angry, confused, hurt, but mostly, I think, he's trying to understand why I didn't trust him enough to tell him the truth. They pulled into the driveway of the modern house Ray had observed days earlier. Lights glowed softly within, creating warm rectangles against the dark exterior. Elise gathered her purse and the hard drive, then hesitated before opening the door. "Thank you, Ray," she said, "for caring enough to get involved. Most people would have looked the other way. Would you like me to wait?" Ray asked, uncertain of his role now that they had arrived. Elise considered the question. "Yes, please. This won't take long." Ray watched as she approached the house, her slender figure momentarily illuminated by the porch light before the front door opened. The silver-haired woman, Elena, appeared, her expression transitioning from wariness to relief upon recognizing Elise. They embraced briefly before disappearing inside. 20 minutes later, Elise emerged carrying a small bundle wrapped in a pale blue blanket. Sophia, Ray realized, the baby at the center of everything. Elena followed, bringing a diaper bag and what appeared to be a small suitcase. Ray quickly exited the car to help with their belongings, opening the rear door as Elise carefully settled into the back seat with the infant. "Elena will follow us in her car," Elise explained as Ray returned to the driver's seat. "Gabriel has arranged for her to stay in our guest apartment until her visa situation is resolved." The baby stirred, making soft noises of protest at being disturbed from sleep. Elise murmured to her in Russian, gentle reassurances that transcended language in their tenderness. Ray caught glimpses of them in the rearview mirror. Elise's face transformed by the simple act of holding the child, all pretense and polished exterior stripped away. "She's beautiful," Ray observed quietly. "She's everything," Elise replied, the simple statement containing worlds of meaning. "I never understood until she came into my life. How completely a child changes your priorities, your perspective, your willingness to risk everything." They drove in companionable silence back toward Seattle, the sleeping infant creating a peaceful center in the midst of surrounding turmoil. Ray sensed Elise's anxiety decreasing with each mile that brought Sophia closer to what would hopefully become her permanent home. "Gabriel wants us to stay at the penthouse tonight," Elise said as they approached the city limits. He thinks it's safer than having Sophia at a separate location while the financial investigation continues. He's worried the media might discover the connection between the money transfers and the adoption process. How much trouble is the company in? Ray asked, guiding the Tesla through light late-night traffic. Substantial, but not insurmountable, Elise replied. The transfers I arranged for Sophia's adoption were separate from Meridian's accounts, but they created patterns that triggered regulatory attention. Once investigators started looking, they discovered other irregularities, nothing I was involved with, but enough to create serious concerns. She shifted Sophia gently as the baby stirred again. Gabriel believes someone in the Singapore office has been using legitimate, international transfers as cover for something more problematic. My activities inadvertently helped expose it, but also created the appearance that I might be involved. Will you be able to complete the adoption? Ray asked, focusing on what he sensed mattered most to Elise. Gabriel has already called his personal attorney, she said, a note of wonder in her voice. He wants to expedite everything, to make Sophia legally ours as quickly as possible. He said, her voice caught slightly. He said that some things are more important than companies or stock prices. That family comes first. They arrived at the luxury high-rise where the Morrisons owned the penthouse apartment. The buildings. Security recognized the vehicle immediately, directing them to a private entrance away from the main lobby. Elena pulled in behind them, parking her modest sedan alongside Gabriel's Tesla. Ray helped carry their belongings to the private elevator. That would take them directly to the penthouse. As they prepared to part ways, Elise impulsively reached out with her free hand to grasp Ray's. You saw what others didn't, she said simply. You reminded me that the truth matters more than appearances. Ray nodded, unexpectedly moved by her words. Take care of your family, Mrs. Morrison. The rest will follow. As the elevator doors closed on Elise, Sophia, and Elena, Ray felt a peculiar sense of completion. He had stepped far outside the boundaries of his position, inserted himself into a situation that by all conventional wisdom should have remained none of his concern. Yet something in his gut told him he had done exactly what was needed, been a witness to truth when deception threatened to derail lives. The night security guard offered to call Ray a taxi, but he declined, preferring to walk to the nearest bus stop. The rain had stopped, leaving the streets gleaming under streetlights like polished glass. Seattle at night possessed a quiet beauty that reminded Ray of why he had settled here after his military service. The city breathed with possibility, with stories unfolding behind countless windows. Tomorrow would bring new complications. Gabriel Morrison still faced a serious financial investigation. Questions remained about the money transfers and their connection to potential wrongdoing at Meridian. Elise and Gabriel would need to rebuild trust, while simultaneously adapting to parenthood under unprecedented circumstances. But tonight, a baby who had lost her mother had found a home. Two people who had married for convenience were discovering something deeper in shared purpose. And Ray Hernandez, night janitor at Meridian Tower, had remembered that sometimes the most important work happens when no one is watching. The following morning broke with unexpected clarity. The persistent Seattle clouds parting to reveal a crisp autumn sky. Ray awoke earlier than usual, his mind still processing the events of the previous night. After a simple breakfast of toast and black coffee, he dressed for his shift at Meridian Tower with particular care, sensing that today would not be ordinary. News of Meridian's financial investigation dominated local business reports. The television in Ray's modest apartment murmured in the background as he prepared for work. Financial analysts speculating on the future of Gabriel Morrison's leadership and the company's stability. None mentioned Elise or a baby. That part of the story remained private, at least for now. When Ray arrived at Meridian Tower, the atmosphere had shifted yet again. Security remained heightened, but the frantic energy of the previous day had transformed into something more focused. Teams of auditors still occupied conference rooms, but their work appeared more methodical now, less urgent. Morrison's making a statement at noon. Ray's supervisor informed the janitorial staff during their morning briefing. All hands on deck to make sure the press areas are spotless. They're expecting media from across the country. Throughout the morning, Ray worked alongside his colleagues preparing the ground floor atrium where Gabriel would address the press. They arranged chairs in precise rows, polished surfaces until they gleamed, and ensured every detail projected the image of a company in control. Despite the crisis that Ray was vacuuming between rows of chairs when a familiar voice called his name. He looked up to see Emily Chun, Gabriel's executive assistant, beckoning from the edge of the atrium. "Mr. Morrison would like to see you," she said, her tone professional but curious. "Now, if possible." Ray followed her to the executive elevator, aware of the questioning glances from his coworkers. The ascent to the top floor occurred in silence, Emily checking her tablet occasionally but offering no explanation for the summons. Gabriel's corner office appeared transformed from the previous day. Gone was the chaos of emergency meetings and hastily assembled documents. Instead, the space projected calm authority, files neatly arranged, monitors displaying organized data, even the morning sunlight seeming to cooperate by casting a warm glow across the polished surfaces. Gabriel stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, but turned when Ray entered. He gestured for Ray to take a seat while concluding his call. "The documentation is being prepared now," Gabriel was saying. "Yes, full disclosure, but with appropriate context. We have nothing to hide." He listened briefly. "Noon, the statement is already drafted." Another pause. "Thank you for your confidence. It means a great deal." He ended the call and turned his full attention to Ray, studying him with newfound interest. "Mr. Hernandez, thank you for coming." "Of course, sir," Ray replied, feeling oddly formal in the executive setting. Gabriel sat across from him, his posture relaxed despite the circumstances. "I wanted to thank you personally for your assistance last night. Mrs. Morrison told me how you've been observant of the situation, how you encouraged her to be truthful." Ray nodded cautiously. "I hope I didn't overstep." "Under normal circumstances." "Perhaps," Gabriel acknowledged. "But these aren't normal circumstances." He leaned forward slightly. "You saw something happening that didn't make sense. Instead of ignoring it or exploiting it, you tried to help. That's rare, especially in corporate environments where self-interest typically prevails." Ray remained silent, unsure how to respond to praise from the CEO. Gabriel continued, his tone shifting to something more personal. "You told me the other night that what matters most is often right in front of us, even when we can't see it. I've been thinking about those words constantly since then." He rose and moved to a credenza where a framed photograph now stood prominently, one Ray hadn't seen before. It showed Elise holding Sophia, both of them illuminated by morning light. The image captured a moment of genuine connection, nothing performative or posed about it. "I married Elise because she was intelligent, capable, and understood the demands of my position," Gabriel said, looking at the photograph. "I thought I was being practical, choosing a partner who complemented my goals without emotional complications. What I failed to consider was that practicality without heart creates a fundamental emptiness." He turned back to Ray. "When Elise finally told me about her sister, about Sophia, about everything she'd been trying to do, my first reaction was anger at the deception. But then I realized something. I had created the conditions for that deception by making it clear that my company came first, always." Ray listened, struck by the vulnerability in Gabriel's voice, so different from the confident CEO persona he projected publicly. "I spent the night reviewing the financial records," Gabriel continued. "Elise's transactions were completely separate from Meridian's accounts. She used her personal funds, established before our marriage, to facilitate her niece's adoption. Complex, yes, legally gray in some areas perhaps, but nothing to do with the actual financial irregularities at Meridian. What happens now? Ray asked. Gabriel's expression hardened slightly. We've identified the source of the actual problem. A senior finance officer in our Singapore office has been manipulating currency exchanges to skim funds. The investigation only uncovered his activities because heightened scrutiny following the unusual patterns of Elise's transfers to Russia. He checked his watch. In an hour, I'll announce the discovery to the press, explain that we've already terminated the individual responsible, and detail the steps we're taking to strengthen oversight. The markets will respond positively to decisive action and transparency. And, Sophia? Ray asked, focusing on what he considered the more important matter. Gabriel's expression softened immediately. Sophia remains with us. I've engaged the top immigration attorneys in the country to expedite her adoption. Given the circumstances, her orphan status, Elise's direct family connection, our resources, we expect the process to conclude successfully, though not without challenges. He returned to his seat, studying Ray with renewed intensity. Which brings me to the reason I asked you here today. I need someone I can trust implicitly, someone who sees clearly and acts with integrity. I'd like to offer you a new position at Meridian. Ray blinked in surprise. Sir? Security liaison for executive operations, Gabriel specified. You would oversee protective services for my family, coordinate with our corporate security team, and manage sensitive matters requiring absolute discretion. Ray sat back, momentarily speechless. Mr. Morrison, I'm a janitor. I have no experience in corporate security. You have 20 years of military experience, according to your employee file, Gabriel countered. And more importantly, you've demonstrated something rare, the ability to see what others miss while maintaining ethical boundaries. Technical skills can be taught, character cannot. He named a salary figure that made Ray inhale sharply, more than triple his current earnings. I don't know what to say, Ray admitted. Say you'll consider it, Gabriel replied. Discuss it with your family. The position would begin immediately if you accept. He stood, signaling the meeting's conclusion. One more thing, Mr. Hernandez. Elise asked if you would join us for dinner this weekend. She thinks Sophia should properly meet the man who helped bring her home. Ray stood, still processing the unexpected offer. I'd be honored. As he left the executive suite, Ray felt slightly disoriented by the rapid shift in his circumstances. The elevator descended smoothly, carrying him back to the ground floor where his cleaning cart waited. For now, he would return to his regular duties, the familiar routines providing space to consider the decision before him. The atrium had filled with media representatives during his absence. Camera crews set up equipment while reporters checked microphones and rehearsed opening statements. In less than an hour, Gabriel Morrison would stand before them, revealing selected truths while protecting what mattered most. Ray moved through the crowd unnoticed, invisible as always in his maintenance uniform. But something had fundamentally changed. He had been seen, his perspective valued, his integrity recognized. Whatever he decided about Gabriel's offer, that recognition itself represented a profound shift. As noon approached, Ray positioned himself at the back of the atrium, curious to witness Gabriel's public statement. The CEO appeared exactly on schedule, Elise at his side. They presented a united front, polished, composed, but with a subtle difference Ray immediately noticed. The carefully maintained space that had always existed between them had closed. They stood closer now, shoulders nearly touching, the invisible barrier dissolved by shared purpose. Gabriel spoke with calm authority about the financial irregularities, the terminated executive, the strengthened oversight measures being implemented. The markets would respond well to his command of the situation, his transparency regarding the problems while offering clear solutions. What he didn't mention, what remained carefully protected, was Sophia, the child who had inadvertently catalyzed the entire situation. As the press conference concluded, Elise's gaze drifted across the room, eventually finding Ray at the back. She offered a slight smile, genuine, unguarded, before turning to leave with Gabriel. In that brief exchange, Ray understood something essential about the nature of truth. Sometimes it needed to be proclaimed publicly, and sometimes it needed to be protected privately. Wisdom lay in knowing the difference. 3 days later, Ray found himself in an entirely unfamiliar position, standing at the private entrance of the Morrison penthouse, dressed not in his maintenance uniform, but in his best button-down shirt and pressed slacks. The security guard at the desk nodded with newfound respect, having been informed of Ray's impending role within the organization. "Mr. Morrison is expecting you, Mr. Hernandez," the guard said, directing him to the private elevator. 15th floor, all the way up. The elevator ascended silently, its polished wood interior reflecting Ray's slightly nervous expression. He carried a small gift, a handcrafted wooden music box he'd purchased years ago for his granddaughter, but had never given her. Something about its gentle melody had seemed right for Sophia, a child whose journey had already contained so much complexity. When the doors opened, Elise herself was waiting, her appearance markedly different from the polished corporate wife Ray had observed for months. Her hair fell in natural waves, her face bore minimal makeup, and she wore simple linen pants with a cashmere sweater, comfortable elegance rather than calculated perfection. "Ray," she greeted him warmly, the formality of their previous interactions completely dissolved. "Thank you for coming." She led him through the penthouse, the space transformed from the minimalist showcase Ray had glimpsed on security footage. Children's items now integrated with the sophisticated decor, a soft play mat spread near the floor-to-ceiling windows, colorful toys tastefully arranged in hand-woven baskets, a state-of-the-art bassinet positioned where afternoon light created gentle patterns across its surface. Gabriel emerged from what appeared to be a home office, his transformation even more striking than his wife's. Gone was the tailored suit and carefully maintained expression of corporate authority. Instead, he wore jeans and a casual sweater, his hair slightly mussed, his posture relaxed. "Ray, welcome," he said, extending his hand. "We're glad you could join us." Elena appeared from the kitchen, carrying Sophia. The baby had grown even in the few days since Ray had last seen her, her dark eyes alert and curious as she surveyed the newcomer. Elena handed the child to Elise with practiced ease before returning to what smelled like an elaborate dinner preparation. "Would you like to hold her?" Elise asked Ray, already moving toward him with Sophia cradled in her arms. Ray hesitated briefly before accepting the infant, his weathered hands supporting her with the confident gentleness of an experienced grandfather. Sophia studied his face with intense concentration before breaking into a toothless smile that transformed her entire countenance. "She approves," Gabriel observed, a hint of genuine warmth in his voice. "Sophia seems to be an excellent judge of character." Ray chuckled, gently bouncing the baby as she reached for his collar with curious fingers. "My granddaughter was the same at this age, fascinated by new faces, but very selective about who could hold her." They moved to the living area, the conversation flowing with unexpected ease across the vast social divide that would have made such interaction unthinkable just days earlier. Ray learned that Gabriel had grown up in modest circumstances in Minneapolis, the son of a high school math teacher and a nurse. His path to success had been paved with scholarships, strategic risks, and relentless work ethic, not entirely unlike Ray's own journey through military service and subsequent civilian life, though with dramatically different outcomes. "I've considered your offer," Ray said during a natural pause in the conversation, after Elena had taken Sophia for her evening feeding. "I'd like to accept the position." Gabriel nodded, satisfaction rather than surprise in his expression. "Excellent. Emily will have the paperwork ready on Monday. We can arrange for transitional training immediately. There's one condition, Ray added, his tone respectful but firm. I'd like to bring on my son-in-law as part of the security team. Michael served 12 years in the Marines, including specialized protection details. He's been looking for the right opportunity since completing his service last year. Gabriel and Elise exchanged a brief glance, a silent communication passing between them. Of course, Gabriel agreed. Family connections are valuable in positions requiring absolute trust. Dinner was served in the dining room overlooking the Seattle skyline, the lights of the city beginning to twinkle as evening descended. Elena had prepared a remarkable meal blending Russian and American influences, beef stroganoff alongside Pacific Northwest salmon, accompanied by roasted vegetables and fresh bread. Elena was a chef in St. Petersburg before coming to America, Elise explained as they enjoyed the meal. My sister met her at the conservatory, Katya performing, Elena running the faculty dining service. They became inseparable friends. She's agreed to stay on as Sophia's nanny, Gabriel added. We're working with immigration attorneys to secure her permanent residency. Her culinary skills are just an exceptional bonus. Throughout dinner, the conversation continued to flow naturally between practical discussions of Ray's new role and more personal exchanges. Ray shared stories of raising his 3 children, often alone during military deployments when his wife managed everything at home. Gabriel spoke of building Meridian from a small cybersecurity startup to a global enterprise. Elise described her childhood in Russia, the early loss of her parents, and her fierce determination to protect her sister. The adoption proceedings are advancing, Elise said as they finished dessert, a delicate apple charlotte that Elena had presented with evident pride. Our attorneys believe we can complete the process within 3 months, given the exceptional circumstances and Sophia's best interests. The press statement about the financial investigation has stabilized the company, Gabriel added. Stock prices have nearly recovered, and the board has expressed full confidence in my leadership. He glanced at Elise. We've decided to be transparent about Sophia once the adoption is finalized. No more secrets. As the evening concluded, Ray presented his gift. Elise opened the wooden box carefully, her expression softening as the gentle melody filled the room. Brahms' lullaby rendered in delicate chimes. It's beautiful, she whispered, visibly moved by the gesture. My wife always said that music speaks when words fail, Ray explained. For a child with Russian heritage, music seemed appropriate. Later, as Ray prepared to leave, Gabriel walked him to the elevator. The 2 men stood in comfortable silence for a moment, the events of the past week creating an unlikely connection between them. Thank you, Gabriel said finally. Not just for accepting the position, but for seeing what was important when I couldn't. Ray nodded, understanding the deeper meaning behind the simple statement. Sometimes we all need someone to help us notice what's right in front of us. As the elevator doors closed, Ray caught a final glimpse of the penthouse, Gabriel returning to where Elise sat with Sophia in her arms, the 3 of them illuminated by soft lamplight against the backdrop of the Seattle night sky. A family, finding its way toward authenticity, their public facade giving way to something more genuine and ultimately more valuable. The descent to the ground floor gave Ray time to reflect on the remarkable turn his life had taken. At 67, when many of his peers were settling into retirement, he was embarking on an entirely new chapter, one that would utilize his experience and integrity in ways his janitorial position never could. As he exited the building into the cool evening air, Ray felt a deep sense of satisfaction. Sometimes the most important work happened in the shadows, unnoticed and uncelebrated. But occasionally, truth emerged into the light, changing everything in its wake. 6 months later, spring had transformed Seattle from its winter grayscale to vibrant greens and unexpected bursts of color. Cherry blossoms lined the streets near Meridian Tower, their delicate petals occasionally catching in the breeze and swirling through the air like fragrant snowflakes. Inside the corporate headquarters, changes equally profound had taken root. Ray's office on the executive floor, still a novelty he hadn't fully acclimated to, offered a view previously accessible to him only while cleaning windows. His desk remained meticulously organized, a habit from his military days that had served him well in his new role. On the credenza behind him stood family photographs, his late wife Maria, their children, grandchildren, and a recent addition, a candid shot of Sophia celebrating her first birthday, her face alight with wonder at the candle flame before her. A knock at his door preceded Michael's entrance. Ray's son-in-law had thrived in his position on the security team, his military precision complemented by an intuitive understanding of potential vulnerabilities. At 34, Michael brought technological expertise that balanced Ray's old-school observational skills perfectly. "The venue security plans are finalized for tomorrow's event," Michael reported, setting a tablet on Ray's desk. "We've coordinated with local law enforcement and the private security team. Everything's set." Ray nodded, reviewing the detailed schematics for Sophia's adoption celebration. The event would mark both her legal adoption and her first birthday, combining milestone celebrations in a way that seemed fitting for a child whose existence had already bridged multiple worlds. "Gabriel's parents arrived from Minneapolis this afternoon," Michael continued. "Their car is arranged. Elise's friends from the Russian Cultural Center have all confirmed attendance." He hesitated slightly. "There's been increased media interest since the announcement. Several outlets have requested interviews with the family." "All requests go through Emily," Ray reminded him, referring to Gabriel's executive assistant, who now handled the family's public engagements with the same efficiency. She brought to corporate matters. "The Morrisons are willing to share Sophia's story, but on their terms." The Morrison family had emerged from the financial crisis stronger than anyone might have predicted. Gabriel's swift handling of the corporate investigation had reinforced investor confidence, while the eventual public announcement about Sophia had generated unexpected goodwill. The narrative of a successful businessman and his wife opening their home to an orphan niece resonated deeply, humanizing the corporate leader in ways his previous philanthropic efforts never had. Ray's phone buzzed with a message from Elise. "Sophia just took 3 steps on her own. Can you stop by the house when you're finished today? We have something to discuss before tomorrow's event." The Morrison penthouse had undergone a subtle but significant evolution over the past months. What had once been a showcase of minimalist luxury had transformed into a genuine home. Sophisticated furniture now coexisted with developmental toys. The pristine white walls of one room had been repainted in gentle yellows to create Sophia's nursery. Photographs, real family moments rather than staged portraits, appeared on previously bare surfaces. When Ray arrived that evening, he found Gabriel on the floor of the living room, jacket discarded and sleeves rolled up, encouraging Sophia as she wobbled precariously between his outstretched arms and Elise's welcoming hands. "Watch this," Gabriel said without looking up as Ray entered. "She's determined to master walking before tomorrow's party." Sophia's face reflected intense concentration, her tiny brow furrowed as she lifted one foot, then the other, maintaining a precarious balance for 3 steps before tumbling forward into Elise's embrace. The adults erupted in applause, causing Sophia to beam with pride before scrambling to try again. "She's persistent," Ray observed, smiling at the scene. "A valuable quality." "Like her mother," Gabriel replied, sharing a meaningful glance with Elise. Though Sophia was technically Elise's niece, they had begun referring to themselves as her parents, a truth that transcended biology. Elena emerged from the kitchen, wiping her hands on an apron. "Dinner is ready whenever you are," she announced, Her English significantly improved after months of intensive language classes sponsored by the Morrisons. Her role had evolved from temporary nanny to permanent household manager, her resident status secured through Gabriel's connections. Over dinner, conversation flowed easily between topics: final arrangements for tomorrow's celebration, meridians, expanding operations, Ray's daughter Carmen's recent promotion at the hospital where she worked as a nurse. The barriers that might once have separated individuals from such different circumstances had dissolved entirely, replaced by genuine connection. "We wanted to discuss something with you before tomorrow," Elise said as they finished the meal, her expression turning serious. "It's about Sophia's future." Gabriel reached for his wife's hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become natural over the months. "We've been working with our attorneys to establish Sophia's legal protections," he explained. "Trust funds, educational provisions, everything she might need." "That seems prudent," Ray replied, unsure why this required discussion with him. "We've also been considering contingencies," Elise continued. "If anything were to happen to both of us, Sophia would need guardians, people who understand her history, who would honor her Russian heritage while giving her a loving home." Ray set down his fork as the implication became clear. "We'd like to name you and your daughter Carmen as Sophia's legal guardians in our will," Gabriel stated directly. "We can think of no one better to entrust with her care if circumstances required it." Ray sat in stunned silence, the magnitude of their request sinking in. "I'm honored by your trust," he said finally. "But I'm 67 years old. Have you considered someone younger?" "We've considered every possibility," Elise assured him. "Your age brings wisdom and perspective that younger guardians might lack. And with Carmen as co-guardian, Sophia would have both your experience and her energy." "You've shown us what family truly means, Ray," Gabriel added quietly. "Not just biological connection, but choice, commitment, seeing what matters and protecting it, even when it's difficult." Ray looked at Sophia, contentedly playing with wooden blocks in her high chair, blissfully unaware of the serious conversation surrounding her future. In her dark eyes, he saw echoes of resilience that reminded him of his own children, of the cycles of protection and growth that define family across generations. "I would need to discuss this with Carmen," he said carefully. "But speaking for myself, I would consider it the highest privilege to be Sophia's guardian if ever needed." The adoption celebration transformed the elegant garden venue into a blend of cultural traditions. Russian folk music played softly beneath flowering cherry trees, while tables arranged in conversational clusters featured both American and Eastern European delicacies. Children from the Morrisons' extended social circle explored a thoughtfully designed play area, their laughter providing a joyful soundtrack to the afternoon. Sophia, dressed in a cream linen dress with delicate embroidery that Elise had commissioned from artisans in St. Petersburg, moved between guests with newfound mobility. Her walking had improved dramatically overnight, as if she'd been saving the skill for this precise moment. Each successful journey between outstretched hands earned her delighted applause, which she clearly enjoyed, her face lighting up with each accomplishment. Ray observed the proceedings from a professional distance, his security team positioned discreetly throughout the venue. Michael coordinated their movements via subtle hand signals and occasional murmured communications through nearly invisible earpieces. The media had been granted limited access. One photographer and one reporter from the Seattle Times, carefully shepherded by Emily to ensure the family's privacy remained protected even in this public celebration. "You've created quite an operation," a familiar voice commented. Ray turned to find Gabriel approaching, champagne flute in hand. The CEO had relaxed considerably over the past months, his formerly rigid posture softening, his expressions more genuine. Today he wore a suit that, while impeccably tailored, seemed to sit more naturally on his frame, clothing chosen for the man rather than the image. "Just doing my job," Ray replied modestly. Gabriel smiled, the expression reaching his eyes in. a way it rarely had during their early encounters. Your job has expanded considerably from where we started. Security, family protection, trusted advisor. He gazed across the garden to where Elise was introducing Sophia to an elderly couple. His parents, visiting from Minneapolis. I sometimes wonder what would have happened if you hadn't been observant that night. If you had simply cleaned the offices and gone home without getting involved. Ray followed his gaze, watching Sophia reach curiously for her grandmother's necklace, while the older woman beamed with delight. Someone would have discovered the truth eventually. Secrets have a way of emerging. Perhaps, Gabriel acknowledged. But the manner of discovery matters. You gave Elise the courage to be honest before circumstances forced the issue. That made all the difference. A small commotion near the entrance drew their attention. A woman had arrived unannounced and was speaking urgently with the security personnel at the gate. Even from a distance, Ray could see she was agitated, gesturing emphatically as she tried to gain entrance. "I'll handle this," Ray said, immediately. Moving toward the disturbance dot as he approached, he recognized the woman from Meridian's Human Resources Department, Natalie Winters, who had processed his promotion paperwork months earlier. Her typically professional demeanor had given way to evident distress. "Mr. Hernandez," she said when she spotted him. "I need to speak with Mr. Morrison immediately. It's urgent, about the Singapore situation." Ray assessed her quickly, noting the folder clutched tightly in her hands and the genuine concern in her expression. "I'll take you to him," he decided. Signaling to Michael to maintain heightened awareness, he led Natalie through the garden, positioning himself to shield their approach from the majority of guests. Gabriel noticed their arrival immediately, his expression shifting from relaxed celebration to focused attention. "Miss Winters," Gabriel greeted her, stepping slightly away from nearby conversations. "What brings you here today?" "I apologize for interrupting, sir," Natalie replied, her voice low but urgent. "But I've discovered something in the financial records that couldn't wait until Monday." She glanced around nervously. "It concerns the executive who was terminated after the investigation." Gabriel nodded once, excusing himself from the gathering with practiced social grace before guiding Natalie and Ray to a private alcove beneath a flowering magnolia tree. "What have you found?" Natalie opened her folder, revealing documents covered in highlighted sections and handwritten notes. The Singapore transactions weren't isolated incidents. They were part of a pattern dating back years, involving multiple executives, including board members. Ray watched Gabriel absorb this information, noting the slight tightening around his eyes, the only visible indication of its significance. "The evidence is conclusive?" Gabriel asked, his voice controlled. "Yes, sir. I cross-referenced everything. Multiple times. The terminated executive was just a visible part of a much larger problem." Gabriel was silent for a moment, his gaze drifting toward Elise and Sophia, now surrounded by a small group of admirers. The contrast between the celebration of family and the potential corporate crisis created a tension that Ray could feel physically. "Ray," Gabriel said finally, "please ask Emily to collect my laptop from the car." Discreetly, he turned back to Natalie. "Thank you for bringing this directly to me. I'll need to review everything immediately." As Ray moved to fulfill the request, he glanced back to see Gabriel placing a gentle hand on Natalie's shoulder, not the gesture of a CEO to an employee, but of one human acknowledging another's courage. It was a small moment that embodied the change Ray had witnessed over months. Gabriel Morrison learning to value people above position, truth above appearance. When Ray returned with Emily and the laptop, Gabriel had already created an impromptu workspace at a small table partially concealed by landscaping. He looked up as they approached, his expression resolute. "Emily, we need to contact the board chair immediately." "Ray, please inform Elise that I'll need approximately 30 minutes. He hesitated, then added, "Tell her not to worry. Some things require immediate attention, but family remains the priority. Ray nodded, understanding the balance Gabriel was attempting to maintain, addressing corporate responsibilities without allowing them to overshadow the day's true purpose. As he walked back toward the celebration, Ray reflected on how profoundly perspectives had shifted. 6 months ago, Gabriel would have abandoned the event entirely for such a crisis. Today, he sought to handle it without disrupting what mattered most. 5 years passed like the turning of seasons, each one bringing new growth and subtle transformations. Seattle's skyline evolved with the addition of sleek new towers, though Meridian's headquarters remained a constant, its glass exterior reflecting changing skies, while the company within strengthened and expanded under Gabriel's leadership. A bright September morning, Ray stood beside his car in front of an elegant brick building in Queen Anne Hill. At 72, he had settled comfortably into semi-retirement, his security role at Meridian reduced to consulting status, while Michael had advanced to head the entire corporate security division. Ray now devoted most of his time to his expanding family, a new grandson born to his son David, weekend fishing trips with his grandsons, and special outings with a certain dark-haired girl who had claimed a unique place in his heart, Sophia. Morrison emerged from the school entrance, her navy uniform crisp and her backpack nearly as large as she was. At 6 years old, she carried herself with a confidence that reminded Ray of both Gabriel's purposeful stride and Elisa's graceful poise, nature and nurture creating something entirely unique. Her face brightened upon spotting him, and she ran forward with unrestrained enthusiasm. "Ray, you came!" she exclaimed, throwing her arms around his waist. "Of course I did," he replied, returning her hug before opening the car door. "First day of first grade deserves a special pickup. How was school?" "Amazing." Sophia settled into the booster seat, buckling herself in with practiced ease. "Miss Thompson said my Russian counting was excellent, and I got to help a new boy who was scared because he didn't know anyone." Ray smiled as he started the car, recognizing Elisa's empathy in the child's actions. "That was kind of you. Mama says we should remember how it feels to be new somewhere," Sophia explained with the matter-of-fact wisdom of children. "Is it true you knew me when I was a baby in Russia?" The question caught Ray by surprise. "Not exactly. I met you shortly after you came to America. Who told you that?" Sophia shrugged, her attention already shifting to the passing scenery. "I heard Daddy telling someone at his office that you knew his secret before he did, that you saw me first." Ray considered how to respond, aware of the delicate balance between truth and age-appropriate explanation. "Your father and I met because I noticed something important that needed attention. Sometimes adults miss what's right in front of them because they're busy looking at other things." This seemed to satisfy Sophia, who nodded solemnly before launching into a detailed account of the classroom turtle named Herbert. Ray listened attentively as he navigated toward the Morrison home, no longer the austere penthouse but a waterfront house on Mercer Island with a garden where Sophia could play and Elena could grow vegetables for her increasingly renowned dinner parties. When they arrived, Elise was waiting on the porch, her professional attire suggesting she had rearranged her schedule at the Russian Cultural Center, where she now served as director. The position allowed her to maintain connections to her heritage, while building cultural bridges in the community, work that had given her a sense of purpose beyond her role as Sophia's mother. "There's my scholar," Elise called as Sophia bounded from the car. "Tell me everything about your first day." Ray followed at a more measured pace, enjoying the tableau of mother and daughter, their dark heads bent together in animated conversation, their gestures mirroring each other unconsciously. Elise had blossomed in motherhood, her formerly guarded demeanor giving way to an open warmth that transformed her beauty from something merely aesthetic to something deeply human. "Ray, you'll stay for dinner," Elise insisted, looking up from Sophia's enthusiastic narrative. "Gabriel is bringing home the contracts from the London expansion." We should celebrate both Sophia's first day and Meridian's growth. The invitation required no consideration. I'd be honored, Ray replied, following them into the home that had become a second family for him. Inside, evidence of a life richly lived filled every space. Sophia's artwork adorned walls alongside museum-quality pieces. Photographs chronicled family milestones, holidays, vacations, ordinary moments made special through the act of preservation. Books in multiple languages filled shelves, many with colorful bookmarks indicating active reading rather than decorative display. Elena emerged from the kitchen, flour dusting her apron as she greeted Sophia with a kiss and Ray with a warm smile. Over the years, she had become family as well, her role evolving from nanny to beloved aunt as Sophia grew more independent. Her apartment over the garage provided privacy while keeping her close to the child she had helped raise from infancy. As Ray settled into a comfortable chair, watching Sophia demonstrate her new school dance to an appreciative audience of mother and honorary aunt, he reflected on the extraordinary chain of events that had brought them all together. A chance observation, a moment of courage, a decision to speak rather than remain silent. Such small actions with such profound consequences. Later, when Gabriel arrived home, his greeting to Sophia came first, a full-bodied hug that lifted her off the ground, before he acknowledged the adults with the relaxed familiarity of found family. The corporate titan remained evident in his bearing, but it no longer defined him. Father, husband, friend, these roles had reshaped his priorities in ways that had ultimately strengthened, rather than diminished his professional success. Dinner unfolded with the comfortable rhythm of established tradition. Elena's culinary creations earned enthusiastic appreciation. Sophia regaled them with first-grade observations and questions. Gabriel and Elise shared news of their respective work without allowing it to dominate the conversation. Ray contributed stories of his grandson's latest adventures. In these ordinary moments, Ray recognized the extraordinary gift he had received, not just the professional advancement or financial security, but the privilege of witnessing a family forged through choice rather than obligation, strengthened by challenges rather than diminished by them. When Sophia insisted on showing Ray her latest art project before he departed, Gabriel accompanied them to her room, where a meticulously crafted family tree spread across a science poster board. "My family project," Sophia explained proudly. "We had to show all our important people." Ray noted with quiet emotion that she had included him among the branches, his name written in careful first-grade penmanship alongside her parents, Elena, his children, and her grandparents. The janitor who had once moved invisibly through corporate corridors had become an essential part of a child's understanding of family. "It's perfect," Gabriel said, his hand resting lightly on his daughter's shoulder. His gaze met Ray's, conveying wordless understanding of how far they had all traveled from that rainy night when a CEO had failed to see what a janitor recognized immediately, that true wealth had nothing to do with corporate success and everything to do with human connection. Autumn painted the Pacific Northwest in brilliant hues of amber and crimson as Ray celebrated his 75th birthday. The occasion was marked by a gathering at the Morrison home, not a lavish affair, but an intimate celebration bringing together the interconnected strands of Ray's life. His children and grandchildren mingled with the Morrisons and select colleagues from Meridian, creating a tapestry of relationships that would have seemed impossible 8 years earlier. Sophia, now 9 and possessing the poised confidence of a child raised with both love and expectations, had appointed herself master of ceremonies. She moved through the gathering with a clipboard, ensuring that the celebration schedule she had meticulously planned proceeded without deviation. Her organizational skills prompted Gabriel to joke that she was destined to become CEO of Meridian, a possibility he seemed to regard with genuine pride rather than the corporate dynasty building common among his peers. "Speech time," Sophia announced, tapping a spoon against her glass with such authority that conversations immediately quieted. Ray found himself ushered to the center of the gathering, surrounded by faces representing every chapter of his life. His daughter, Carmen, stood nearby, her hand resting on the shoulder of her youngest son. Michael, now established as Meridian Security Director, watched with evident pride in his father-in-law. Elise and Gabriel had positioned themselves slightly to one side, their typical preference for avoiding center stage, unchanged despite their prominence in Seattle's business and cultural communities. "I'm not one for speeches," Ray began, the slight tremor in his voice betraying emotion rather than age. "My wife Maria was always better with words. She used to say that a person's wealth shouldn't be measured by what they own, but by who would miss them when they're gone." He paused, gazing around the circle of faces. "Looking at all of you today, I find myself far richer than I ever imagined possible. My family has expanded in ways I never anticipated. My life has taken turns I couldn't have predicted." Sophia nodded encouragingly from her position at the front, clipboard clutched to her chest. 8 years ago, I was a night janitor at Meridian Tower, invisible to most of the people who worked there. I did my job, kept to myself, and planned for a quiet retirement." Ray's gaze found Gabriel across the gathering. "Then one night, I noticed something that didn't make sense. A successful CEO with a wife who was hiding a secret baby." Gentle laughter rippled through the group, the story having become something of a family legend over the years. "I could have minded my business, looked the other way. Many would say that was the sensible choice." Ray shook his head slightly. "But my mother raised me to believe that, when you see someone struggling, you don't walk past. You stop, you help if you can." Elise's eyes glistened as she reached for Gabriel's hand, their fingers intertwining in a gesture that had become natural over the years. That simple choice, to notice, to care, to speak up when it would have been easier to stay silent, changed everything. Ray looked directly at Sophia, who was listening with unusual stillness. "It brought this remarkable young lady into a home where she is treasured. It gave me a second career when I thought my working days were nearly over. Most importantly, it reminded me that family isn't just who we're born to, but who we choose to hold close." Gabriel stepped forward, raising his glass. "To Ray Hernandez, the man who saw what truly mattered when I was blinded by balance sheets in boardrooms. Who taught me that legacy isn't measured in market share, but in moments of courage and connection." He smiled at Sophia, who had abandoned her clipboard to slip her hand into her father's free one. "Who helped create our family before we even knew we needed one." As glasses were raised and birthday wishes offered, Ray felt a profound sense of completion. The invisible barriers that once separated people by position and privilege had dissolved, replaced by bonds forged through shared experience and mutual respect. The night janitor and the CEO had become family in all the ways that mattered, not through obligation or expectation, but through the simple, powerful act of seeing each other's humanity. Later, as the celebration continued around him, Ray found a quiet moment on the terrace overlooking Lake Washington. The evening light cast golden reflections across the water, a natural beauty that no corporate view could rival. Sophia joined him, momentarily escaped from her organizational duties. "Did you know?" she asked abruptly, with the directness unique to children. "When you saw me as a baby, did you know how important you would become to us?" Ray smiled, struck by her perception. "No, Sophia, I just knew you were important, that you deserved to be seen and protected. The rest happened one day at a time." She considered this with solemn attention before nodding, apparently satisfied. "That's how the best things happen, I think. Not all planned out, but one good choice after another." Looking at this remarkable child, thoughtful, compassionate, secure in her place in the world, Ray understood the true impact of that rainy night 8 years ago. Not career advancement or financial security, but the privilege of witnessing a family find its way to authenticity and purpose. The janitor who knew the truth had simply illuminated what already existed in potential, the capacity for connection that transcends circumstance and transforms lives one choice at a time. As twilight deepened into evening, the celebration gradually wound down. Guests departed with warm embraces and promises of future gatherings, until only the core family remained, the Morrisons, Ray, and his daughter Carmen's family. They settled in the living room, the comfortable silence of people who no longer needed constant conversation to feel connected. Sophia, fighting sleep despite her insistence that she wasn't tired, curled against Ray's side on the sofa. "Tell me again how you knew," she murmured, her voice drifting toward dreams. "Some truths can't stay hidden," Ray replied softly, smoothing her dark hair. "Not when they matter so much." Gabriel stood by the fireplace, contemplating the dancing flames that mirrored the warmth that had transformed his life. 8 years ago, I thought success meant stock prices and expansion deals, he reflected. I never imagined my greatest achievement would be sitting right here in this room. Elise smiled, her gaze moving from her husband to her daughter to the extended family they had created together. Sometimes the most important people in our lives are the ones who see us clearly, not for who we pretend to be, but for who we truly are. As Sophia finally surrendered to sleep, Ray looked around at the family that had formed against all odds, a CEO and his wife, a child born of tragedy and raised in love, a night janitor whose simple act of noticing had catalyzed profound change. Their story embodied the truth that genuine connection transcends social boundaries, that family is defined by choice rather than circumstance, that seeing what truly matters can transform lives in ways no one could predict. You've been watching. CEO's new wife was hiding a baby. The janitor knew the truth all along. Every life contains unexpected chapters waiting to unfold, moments when courage and compassion can change everything. Our stories celebrate these transformative connections that remind us of our shared humanity. If this journey touched your heart, join our community of storytellers and listeners. Subscribe to our channel for more tales that whisper of redemption, second chances, and the family we create through our choices. Until next time, remember that sometimes the most important truths are hiding in plain sight, waiting for someone brave enough to see them.